Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Luis Fernandez. An internal shuffle is raising new questions about partisanship at the North Carolina State Board of Elections. Less than a week before voters went to the polls this month, a top staffer took voluntary leave after what appeared to be an internal dispute over a statement refuting a Democratic Party leader. That came a day after the board's top lawyer had departed. The departures come months after the elections board shifted from Democratic to Republican control. It also has new oversight from the Republican state auditor. WRAL state government reporter Paul Specht has been covering the changes, and he joins us now. Paul, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so let's start with this shift at the top. A year ago, the State Board of Elections was run by an executive director who was seen as pretty good at her job. She was even the president of the National Elections Association, but she was forced out. What happened?
We have to go back to about this time last year. After Josh Stein won the gubernatorial election, he's a Democrat, the General Assembly came back and made a bunch of new laws. And one of them shifted control of the state elections board from the governor, who was a Democrat and is now a new Democrat. It was Democrat Roy Cooper, now it's Democrat Josh Stein, and shifted it to the state auditor's office. Now, the state auditor's office is run by Dave Bolek. He's a Republican. So when that law took effect in May, Bolek instituted new people on the board. Those people fired Karen Brinson Bell and brought in their preferred executive director, a man named Sam Hayes.
Okay, so fast forward to last week now. What happened?
So we saw a tool on the North Carolina State Board of Elections website that people can use to look up voter registrations. This is used by journalists. It can be used by anybody. You can go on the website, go to the voter lookup tool, type in someone's legal name, and it should, if all your spelling's right, show you whether or not that person is registered to vote. And it'll also show you their address and what precinct they're in and what district they're in and if they're registered with a political party. And so it's something that's used fairly often, especially in our field and journalism, but it went down, right? And so when it did, Anderson Clayton, the chair of the North Carolina Democratic Party, blamed state auditor Dave Bolek and said, I'm going to paraphrase here, this is what you get when you bring in someone to run the elections board who doesn't have experience in doing it. Well, next thing we know, we being WRAL, even the media, we get a statement from the board accusing Clayton of being ignorant and or spreading misinformation about why the site had suffered technical difficulties. So with that in mind, we then saw 2 days later, Patrick Gannon, the longtime public spokesman for the board, go on leave. Now, that was voluntary. He decided to go on leave, but people have sort of been reading the tea leaves here.
Two and two together. Yeah,
we called him and asked him if he wanted to talk to us about it. He said no. He declined to comment, but people have read the tea leaves and seen okay, so here you have a Republican board issuing a statement about the Democratic Party chair, calling her ignorant. Next thing you know, Gannon taking leave. Like you said, they put two and two together, and it looks like there's some internal disputes about just sort of how to handle these public statements.
Let's go ahead and take a quick break there. When we come back, we're going to dive more into the State Board of Elections. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. We're talking with WRAL State Government reporter Paul Specht about changes at the North Carolina State Board of Elections. All right, so let's call this a kerfuffle, if you will, over the Democrats' statement. Has anything like this happened before?
Right. It appears to be a kerfuffle. We don't know that for sure because the state board was also limited in what they could tell us about Gannon because it's a personnel matter. I can't remember a time where a state employee, even not just with the elections board, any employee went on leave and people deduced that it was over drama within the agency. I can't remember that happening, but it's important to note that this is not the first time the board has called out a politician for spreading misinformation, in their own words. It happened about the same time last year. There was a tight race, state Supreme Court race between a Democrat, Allison Riggs, and Republican Jefferson Griffin. People may remember that and say, oh, yeah, I remember that. That's because they didn't certify it until like May. Don't quote me on that, but it was months.
It's been a little bit.
Yeah. And a lot of it was, went to court and all this. Anyway, back to last November. Senate Leader Phil Berger, a Republican, suggested that the count was somehow rigged in favor of Allison Riggs, no pun intended. He said something along the lines of it because Griffin was up and then some votes came in and then Riggs went up. He said, it seems like a case of count until the person you want to win wins. And Brinson Bell, the former executive director under a Democratic board, took exception and wrote a 2-page letter to Berger accusing him of spreading misinformation and asking him to retract his statement and sort of telling him like, hey, these are not her exact words, but if you need help understanding how this process works, I'm glad to explain it to you. And so it was a little, passive-aggressive or snarky as well.
Sure.
So politicians have been called out publicly before for spreading what the board considered to be inaccurate information.
So all of this happens after another key departure, General Counsel Paul Cox, who recently left. Why is that?
Well, Cox, like Gannon and like Brinson Bell, served under a Democratic board. He stayed on, and his last day was October 31st. We did get in touch with him. He now works at a local law firm called Pointer Spruill, and we asked, did this have anything to do, your departure, with the board now being under new management? And he said partially. He sent us a statement, and I don't have it here in front of me, but it said something to the effect of, I had this opportunity to join a local law firm that I consider to be very reputable and that does good work, including around election law. And with the new changes at the board, I felt like it was a good time to leave. So you have the election, I believe, was, November 4th.
Mm-hmm.
Gannon goes on leave November 3rd. Cox, the general counsel since 2022, was out that previous Friday, October 31st. So we just saw just two people who had been there a long time step away permanently in Cox's case, or take leave right before about 800,000 people cast their ballots, and the board had to count them.
So we have these changes, both from leadership as well as individuals on the board. That means that there have to be some new faces. Who has kind of been added? What are those new faces like on the board?
Now, they replaced Cox. At the end of last week, they sent out a press release, and I don't have it here in front of me, but it announced the additions of 3 people. One of them is an attorney to replace Paul Cox. They have a new general counsel. They have a new legislative liaison. That's someone that they send down to the Capitol to go talk to the movers and shakers and say, hey, we would like you to relax this law or impose this law. This would make the board's job easier, right? Her name is Leah Byers. She used to work for Republican Senator Ralph Heiss in the state capitol. He's a very powerful person, so she'll have some clout there. And then they promoted internally as well. And again, I don't have those names, but when I reached out to the board and I asked, how many departures have you had total and how many have you filled? They said they've had 8 since May when Republicans took over. They filled 5. There are still 3 posted on their website. They also posted a 4th job that they got funding for from a bill in recent months. So they believe they're in the process, toward filling all these roles at this agency that is really, really important. It's a high-pressure job. I'm sure all of these people have very high-pressure jobs, counting the ballots and determining who's going to be in power in our state.
Right. It's the bedrock of democracy, if you will.
Yeah.
So the Board of Elections, with that being in mind, impartiality has always seemed to be something you try and maintain, at least a sense of it. With these changes, is there a thought that notion is also changing?
I can't speak for other people, but one could easily look at the new hires and who's in charge and see that, there are people who work for Democrats leaving, and then you have people who have predominantly worked for Republicans coming in. Sam Hayes, the executive director that replaced Brinson Bell, he had worked for House Speaker Destin Hall, a Republican. A new spokesman who answered a lot of our questions. His name's Jason Tyson. He used to work for the Department of Insurance. The insurance commissioner is Mike Causey. He's a Republican. Leah Byers, as I mentioned, the legislative liaison, worked for a Republican state senator. So, yes, there is a sense that things are changing. And, we haven't seen drastic changes in the way things are done. However, people are independent groups that watch, the election laws and watch elections boards to see how things are going. They're going to be monitoring to see if priorities change. And I imagine that they will. Democrats and Republicans have different things in mind when it comes to, how the money should be spent, where people should be spending their time. Among the issues are, how much are they going to crack down on campaign finance violations? How much are they going to try to find people voting who are not eligible, whether they're immigrants or something else? We're sort of in a wait-and-see game. The Republican management, if you will, hasn't even been there a year yet. So we're still in sort of a wait-and-see mode.
We mentioned this at the beginning of the podcast, but I do want to circle back to it, right? You mentioned that the new oversight of the board has shifted from what was governor before to now state auditor, specifically Republican state auditor Dave Bolek. So what is his role in all of this? What will that be like moving forward?
It's a unique situation, and every state does their elections differently. We already were sort of different because many states have their elections boards under the Secretary of State. We saw that, I believe, in Georgia a couple elections ago when there were issues that popped up and they came under the microscope. But with Bolek, he used to be a member of the UNC Board of Trustees. People may recognize his name from there. But the elections board got put under his oversight. And he also, as auditor, has to do things like audit different agencies and municipalities across the state.
A busy guy.
Right.
Most recently with the DMV.
That's right. And so the auditor, that's usually how they come up, at least in our line of work. When you see them in the press, it's usually, auditor finds embezzlement in insert town here, or auditor finds that DMV is wasting X amount on, this company that prints the plates, stuff like that. They put it under State Auditor Bolek, presumably not just because he's a Republican, but because his job is to make sure things work as efficiently as possible. And the elections board here has always, staffers have always said they need more money. I mean, this is a huge undertaking every year, even in odd years like this one. And they could always use more resources to help educate people and just to help the process go smoothly. There's also, now here's the cynical part, in me and a lot of people, Bolek is, because he's a Republican, he has lots of Republican connections, and people down there at the Capitol, presumably have his number and can call him up and say, hey, or the opposite, he can call them up and say, hey, can you do this and help me out? So those relationships likely help as well.
Earlier this year, Republican lawmakers tried to make it easier for Hayes, who you mentioned earlier, to make politically motivated hires and cuts. What has happened with that? Where does that stand?
Right. So we see, as you mentioned, a lot of this we look through the lens of partisan politics. Like, okay, Democrats are out, Republicans are in. There's also this bill that would have allowed Hayes to get rid of, if I remember correctly, about a third of the staff, more easily, I should say, because many state employees have protections that prevent them from being fired for political reasons, things like that. There was a bill that came up earlier this year that would have changed that. People could have been, ushered out for new reasons. That did not end up passing this year. I don't believe it made it to the floor. House Speaker Destin Hall, who is a Republican, said that he believed it still needed some technical review. It still had some troubles with, and he didn't specify what those were. But when it came up, there were some people who spoke about the bill sympathetically, like, oh, I can see where he's coming from. But this bill has some issues that need to be addressed. It won't surprise me if it comes back up maybe next year. Obviously, they're in the middle of a big stalemate over the state budget and stuff like that. The House and the Senate are at odds about future spending. So we'll see. It won't surprise me if it comes back up before the next elections. But in the meantime, you're seeing this board make hires, hire people from other agencies run by Republicans and install them, and that's ongoing even without that bill.
We've seen a lot of these changes now over the past, couple of months. And we had a massive election, a lot of turnout over this past year, even an odd year. And the next year we have midterms and we've got another big election. So how do all these changes that we've seen, how is that going to impact the course of the next year as we prepare for another election here in North Carolina?
It'll be interesting to see this year. Jason Tyson, the board spokesman, said that they processed more than 800,000 votes across more than 400 municipalities without any issues of note, he said. So any significant issues. Now, in the midterms, when there are legislative seats on the ballot, when there are congressional seats, there's a state Supreme Court seat on the ballot. If things get really tight and it comes down to elections board officials needing to make determinations over which ballots count and which don't, like we saw in the last state Supreme Court race, that's where it will get very interesting. We do expect higher turnout. Presumably that leads to more problems, just more people, more problems, right? The
naturally.
Yeah, just the chances of something going wrong just go up naturally. But what I think will be interesting to see is what happens when this board confronts an issue in a race that is really tight and the margins of 1 vote or 10 votes matter. That's where people will look at this board through a partisan lens and say, are they operating in good faith? And with the last board, we should point out the board was not neutral before Republicans took over. It was Democrat controlled. The state law put it under the governor. That meant that he got to pick 3 people. His party got to pick 3 people on the elections board, and the other party, Republicans, got 2. Now it's flipped. So it was never neutral, right? We've just gone from one party to another. And now the Republicans will be on the other end of those accusations of bias. And, if things get really hairy in the next election.
Going to be interesting to see how all this evolves. And we know you will be all over, you and everyone else with the NC Capital team.
That's right. Not just me. I need some help. This is a lot.
It's a lot. Paul, thank you so much. That's WRAL State Government reporter Paul Specht. For his coverage of the State Board of Elections, go to NC Capital section of WRAL.com. I'm Luis Fernandez. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and for making us part of your morning routine. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email with Triangle news, events, and headlines to help you get ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.